dark, rainy night. Another futile crusade for amends. Time moves forward, and nothing changes. I had no choice but to push on. I didn't understand everything, and I never would, but I understood enough. Sometimes a complicated problem is best tackled with a simple solution. I knew this was going to be a bad idea, but in the continued absence of any good ones, I decided to go with it.
These eyes were closed for centuries, and I saw everything. Down here, I walked through the minds of generations. And now, you're free.
Fuck you! You're not coming in here, you fucking asshole!
Hello. I was just sitting here, microphone in hand, reading the Hollow Knight Silksong guide from the ACME, the Australian Centre for the Moving Image. And on page 54, I've made it. I'm in there. And it got me thinking, reminiscing on the games from last year. And that's what we're doing here today. The Mapocolops Game Awards for 2025. Thank you for joining me. I've been working on this one slowly after finishing my last few games that are eligible for this year, and it's going to be something a little more cozy. I went pretty big last year, spent a lot of money, had a whole song and dance stage and routine, bought a lot of props that I really loved and enjoyed sharing, and I'm going to scale it back. Instead of going bigger and bigger, I think, for this Game Awards, we're just going to be a bit more cozy and enjoy our time reflecting on the games that we played together last year. I played 42 games last year. There's technicalities where it could be a little bit higher, but some of the games were very, very short that kind of almost don't even count, but they are games. But I've landed on 42, 43, and a big expansion of what we played, which is massive. I think a very big contribution to that list, and that number was the Mapocolops Game Day streams that we started about halfway through the year, and pretty much every single week from that point, give or take a couple of breaks, I played one full game in a whole stream to just really bolster the numbers of the games that I played. So a very fantastic selection in tonight's Mapocolops Game Awards. I'm very proud of this list, just like reflecting back at from the tail end of 2024 with Yakuza 0 all the way through to Nier Automata being the final eligible game for the 2025 awards. I'm excited to share tonight's categories. I'm excited to go over how we're going to approach tonight's show. I hope you enjoyed the intro that I put together. It was fun to recap every single game that I played in a fun little edit. If I had more time, I would create way more of those, but it was great to just put out a visual reminder of the games played last year with fun little style and great music to go along with it. So that was very enjoyable to put together. And as we look at this massive list of games, it's a lot of games. Some won't get represented in awards categories as much as others. That's just the nature of the quantity of games. So being able to at least showcase some of them in the video was a lot of fun. With that in mind of how many games there are, we've done the Game Awards show for a few years now, and we kind of all understand what these categories mean and how we approach them. So I'm going to try and be a little more concise in how we approach them. I don't need to yap as much when I'm describing what these categories mean and represent. I think we have that rapport. We know what's going on. And something else that took quite a bit of time last year was the 2 runner-ups, 1 winner situation in each category. It really extends the time frame of things. So we're going to try and reduce that in this show as well. But as a compromise, what we're doing instead is each category, if possible, is going to be sort of like a top 10. There will be 10 nominations in each category, if there's 10 that can even be in it. And then I will be talking about and selecting my winner, my favorite out of those 10. So, to be nominated and to reach the top 10, I think is like obviously quite big, especially with playing over 40 games on the channel. So those will just be the premium selection of games in those categories. We've got a couple of new categories in this show as well that I've added that I felt like were fitting and appropriate to how many different games we played. It was a really, really big variety. Obviously, like I've said, Mapocolops Game Day contributed so much and to a lot of games that probably would not have been played otherwise. So I'm very grateful for that. And I think it gives the show and the list of games that I've played, like I said, variety. Variety is the spice of life. I'm a variety gamer, and the Game Day being able to add even more to that and to throw some unexpected curveballs into some of the categories, I think is amazing. So we're going to get into the first category of the show. It's best opening. It's always going to be best opening. It's the opening category of the show. Let's get into it and see what my favorite is. Our first category being best opening, or rather best beginning, the opening segment of the game, our first experience, the first impression, how the game grabbed us right at the start. Best opening. We have 10 for this one, and this is going to be a running theme throughout the show. Really difficult to choose just 10 games, especially when I played so many. So a lot of games kind of going out of the list, going back into the list, really struggling. And as we said last year, we just have to loosen up and just go with it. It's a feeling, and these are my opinions, not maybe your opinions. Maybe we share the same opinions on some of these winners tonight, but we'll see how we go. But the important thing is I just, have to go with what I feel when I select these nominations and these winners. So our first nominations for best beginning is Nier Automata, Clair Obscur, Expedition 33, Death Stranding 2 on the Beach, Final Fantasy Tactics, The Ivalice Chronicles, Naver, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, The Legend of Zelda, A Link to the Past, Nier Replicant, Yakuza 0, and Hollow Knight Silksong. It's a strong list, these 10 games, and like I said, tough list. Some games changed with others, and I thought a little harder about why I really enjoyed particular openings over the others, and I settled on these 10 for numerous reasons. And while I would love to sit here for maybe 10 hours and talk about each and every single game and why I enjoyed those openings, I don't think any of us have time for that. You know, the world is in shambles. We have to... But what I will say is I'll take a moment to just explicitly shout out Link to the Past, because that is the first Zelda game that's going to make an appearance at this show, instead of something like The Wind Waker or Twilight Princess as an opening. And that is because I specifically loved how Link to the Past is just, you're just in it immediately. There isn't like any sort of fanciful setup or something that's going on before you get to go and play the game. There's just something about Link to the Past that felt really cool, that you just get out of bed and that's it. Off you go. Get out into the world. I think the atmosphere of that really gets you immediately, even though it's in that 2D pixel style. It really gets you, and straight away you are the character, instead of maybe watching some lengthy cutscenes before you get to actually walk around. And I really respect that variety and the different approaches that games can take in terms of whether they want to throw you right in immediately, whether they want to set you up first, because it's all in the execution. So particular shout out to Link to the Past probably being the most unique out of the best beginnings that I have on this list. But we're going to talk about and focus on the winner. What was my favorite? We're going to give the best beginning to Clair Obscur Expedition 33. It's a incredibly powerful opening. It's something in that introduction and that sort of particular prologue that spends time explaining some things in terms of relationships and the world that you currently reside in. And it's done in a very natural way, which I really appreciated. It isn't like, here is the exposition, so you understand exactly what is going on. It is, some natural character dialogue. You're sort of picking up on context by talking to the characters around you. And then it hits you hard with just an incredible launching point into what the rest of that game will be. Yeah, very, very hard-hitting, very resonant introduction. And you're gonna hear me say a bunch of broad adjectives and describing words as we talk about this. And the reason why is, not everyone watching might have played Expedition 33 yet, or any of the games that may win in tonight's show. There will be a approach for me to talk about the games in a way that isn't spoilery. I don't want to reveal these things or talk too in depth about particular things. There might be times where I do need to get specific, but for the most part, I'm going to try be vague, but also descriptive. It's a challenge that I have because I play so many games, so many of you watch particular games, and others you have no idea about or you're waiting to get to eventually. So I don't want to accidentally say something that's going to maybe ruin a game or, spoil something a little bit early. But the best beginning does go to Clair Obscur Expedition 33. I just really had a great time, like taking my time walking through that opening segment and then just being completely wrapped up in the emotional weight of that sequence, and then going out into the world, launching off with that expedition, and then just seeing how the rest of the game would go. So that is our first category for best beginning. Now let's move in to the next one. Our next category is always going to be in direct contrast with best beginning, and that is best ending. Which game closed it out the best? Which game was able to kind of put a bow on it in a way that felt satisfying, that the conclusion was something I felt was earned, and Obviously, it comes with a lot of emotional highs. It comes with a lot of craziness. There's different ways that all of these games can choose to end. Do I agree with the ending? Was it a good time at the end of the day? You know, as we sit there in the credits, are we in stunned silence, or is there just so much to talk about that we can't shut up for the whole credit sequence? There's a lot of ways that a game can choose to let it sit with you after those credits roll. So talking about best ending, our top 10 for this one is going to be Hollow Knight Silksong, Nier Automata, Expedition 33, Yakuza 0, Death Stranding 2, Final Fantasy Tactics, Bastion, The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, Lies of P, and The Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker. We now have the other 2 Zelda games to finally make their appearance. I know I said finally, I'm 2 categories in. Finally, we've been waiting so long for Zelda, and it has shown up in here. So we've covered our bases now. Both of those coming up together, I think, is earned and justified. They both get to sit in the top 10. A very good top 10 here for endings, because all 10 of them, that's the thing, they all get their roses in this awards show. Every single nomination that shows up, they're all on the pedestal. It's just a crowded pedestal, but they're all very close. You know, it's hard to rank them. It's hard to put them in exactly an order of what I prefer. It was just easier for me and my poor little heart than to just choose one, to go, these are my 10 favorites and here's my top favorite out of all of them. But it's a very close race, and these are all specific games that they're all getting their participation trophies. They're all getting their medals. You know, while they may not win, they're technically still winning. You know, they're not getting left in the unmentioned category, which is still a shame, because, you know, if we wanted to, I'll break free of my own top 10 already and go, oh my God, mouth washing. That's not on this list. And I want it to be, but I also agonized over the list a lot. So, you know, if we 11 games, top 11, mouth washing's in there too. It's just really, really tough. But, you know, that's not what's going on here. You know, that's the point of this show, is I have to pick a winner, as excruciating as it is. So with the best ending of this top 10, I am going to give it to a particular game where I didn't agonize over the winner. I agonized over the top 10. The winner is Nier Automata, and I also don't think that there is a contest for my top 1 spot either. I think that the top 2 to 10 is where they're all fighting and duking it out for how the hell they can figure that out. But cleared by a long shot is Nier Automata for best ending. This game ends not once, not twice, not thrice, not fourths, not fifths. It ends multiple times, right? A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, Y, and Z. It has 26 27 endings, because random symbol DLC ending. There's 27 endings for Nier Automata. And yes, most of them are joke endings, but that's okay. Because 5 of them in particular, A, B, C, D, and E, are all very, very special. Now, there's a conflict for gamers that when the credits roll, they go, cool, game done. And there are people who have played Nier, Replicant, and Automata and gone, cool, I'm done. Love this game. Might even be my favorite game ever. And that is only with ending A in mind. That's the thing that is really kind of effective about that game, is, you know, if you did want barely any of the story really, and it still can be one of your favorite games of all time, speaks volumes, I think. Obviously, I reached all of the endings for the main story stuff and a lot of the joke endings and the DLC ending as well. And then, for those who know, once you get to the end of the end, it is incredible. It is nothing short of incredible. To even really attempt to describe it is difficult, because I can't spoil it, especially to those who haven't played it yet. I think it's genuinely one of the most effective and thought-provoking games of our time. And the way that it manages to carry that through all the way to the end and then some is very, very special. Nier Automata gets the best ending very easily for me, even without sort of the final ending of that game. It still would be just ridiculously memorable. So that is my favorite game in the best ending category. Let's check out the next one. The next category that we are talking about is going to be best horror. And something that I'm very, very happy about in regards to this category is this is the big one in terms of the variety that the Mapocolops Game Day streams added to the channel and the games we got to play. Because in terms of horror games played, we had a very good Halloween season. This is the most horror games I've ever played on the channel in 1 year, and the Game Day streams were a big, big part of that. I had one pre-recorded playthrough, which was Fatal Frame 2. And there are some games that have horror elements, but I wouldn't typically put them in a proper horror category, that were also pre-recorded playthroughs, but 9 other games were from the Game Day streams that were horror. We had a great streak with that. It was genuinely amazing. So this top 10 is just the 10 horror games that I played last year, which, yeah, I genuinely think that is really, really amazing. We had a 9-game streak before, during, and after Halloween of horror games, which was amazing. The ones before Halloween were not even a Halloween-focused wheel. I spin a wheel that chooses a game at random at the end of every stream. For context, that's how we choose the next game. And I landed on a couple of games with a huge selection of games. Then we had a Halloween-focused one, and then was able to ride that out. And it was just so much fun. So the 10 horror games that I played last year were Fatal Frame 2, Cold Fear, Mouthwashing, Iron Lung, Clock Tower, Cry of Fear, Luigi's Mansion, Fear, Nightmare Creatures, and Milk Inside a Bag of Milk, Inside a Bag of Milk / the sequel, Milk Outside a Bag of Milk, Outside a Bag of Milk. What a wordful. Mouthful? Wordful. From the Milk series, essentially, we played both games in the same stream. So we had 3 games that represent fear: Cold Fear, Cry of Fear, and just simply fear. In this top 10 list, I enjoyed all of them, and maybe like one not as much for its jank, but I appreciated what it was for what it was at the time. So that's a top 10 list because I only played 10 horror games, and my favorite of this list was a little difficult because there's a few different, I guess, subgenres within the horror thing, where you've got your psychological horror, you've got your more action-based horror, you've got, Cold Fear is a Resident Evil type experience, and quite a good one too. I think that's it's a bit slept on. I was a bit surprised with it. I was very surprised with Cold Fear because I was like, this is like very well made. It came out around Resident Evil 4 time, so I was like, yeah, of course it got swept under the radar. Resident Evil 4 is one of the greatest, and they're not going to be looking for an alternative to that right now. My favorite in this list, however, is going to go to Mouthwashing. Mouthwashing, little indie darling horror game. That is the one that when I was talking about end credits and I was talking about sitting in silence, Mouthwashing was that game for me, where you get to the end and you start soaking in that, dare I say, not adventure, not an adventure, dare I say that experience that you go on. It's a psychological horror, and it's like 4 hours, 3-4 hours. I can't exactly remember how long my stream was for that game, but I think it is the perfect length. I think to tell that story with those characters that it's trying to tell and to be effective about it. The psychological horror element of that game was truly enjoyable, and I use enjoyable lightly in a horror sense. Enjoyable in its true sense of the word, no, not at all. But that's horror. It's psychological. I enjoyed how well it was made. A lot of incredible imagery. It's not voiced, so I got to apply my own voices and sort of personalities to these characters. So I had a bit of a unique experience in that way. But the way that these characters interacted with one another as the story unfolds, I thought was absolutely incredible, coupled with some other amazing pieces that really, sell it as a horror package. It's interesting because I'm trying not to go off on a tangent on talking about other elements of mouthwashing that I really appreciate. Like, I really like this part of it and this part of it, but just trying to keep it focused to specifically its horror. I loved it, and that's why it's my winner. Again, like I say, it's very tough because you have like stuff like Fatal Frame, which is a bit more like of that old school like fixed camera perspective horror that I really love, and the atmosphere is very oppressive, and ghosts. I was probably more scared in Fatal Frame 1. That first exposure to the series really got to me. Fatal Frame 1 was scarier for me. Fatal Frame 2, I had a bit of thicker skin of like what I was going into, so it didn't scare me as much, but it was still quite spooky. But then you've also, like on the other side, you've got Luigi's Mansion, and that's the scariest game that anyone's ever played. Mario! It's horror, okay? It's horror for the kids, and, Luigi's crap in his pants, so we may as well crap right along with him. It's included in there, because of course it is. Luigi's Mansion, terrifying game. It counts as a horror, okay? It's just a playful horror. And then Fear is one of those situations where it's much more action heavy, first person shooter horror, and I love that as well. So I'm being cheeky, and I'm talking about other games in this list because I think that they do deserve a little bit more of like a shout out, just specifically because there's so many varying types. We've got like Iron Lung, hit movie now, by the way, hit movie Iron Lung. And, I at least get to say I played the game before the movie. Being exposed to that game and then going to watch the movie was amazing. I feel bad for anyone who went to see that movie not having any clue about that game because, actually recognizing things and understanding like the situation that they're in made that movie hit pretty damn hard. Good movie, The Iron Lung. And the game is great too. So being able to see just these small, short indie experiences, see how that could be blown up into something massive, that meant a lot. I loved seeing that. And I hope we can see that more. Not necessarily with, hey, good indie game, let's make it a big old movie, but just seeing how these indie games can resonate with people, especially creative people, and inspire them to either do something brand new and try and have that same effect, or take that thing that inspired them so greatly and maybe lit a fire in them to adapt it, to push it further, to do something with it, with the creator's involvement and blessing. Fucking amazing. So Iron Lung, just quick little shout out. Great horror experience for that one. I can't really give it a win based on the fact that there's not a lot going on with it, but the way that it handles like playing with your head and the atmosphere of Iron Lung, incredible. Best horror got some special attention this year, specifically because we played so many, and I was very happy with that. So I hope you enjoyed the horror games that were on display this year as well. There were other games that, like I said, they had horror elements like American Mickey's Alice, I would classify as like a light horror, but not enough for me to classify it as a true horror. But that was also around the same Halloween period, and it was just a great time. Let's check out the next one. Our next category is a top 5, one of our first categories that does not have enough games to meet its requirement, but I still wanted to put this category in there regardless. This is our best shooter. We played a few this year. Should I say this year when I talk about 2025? We played a few last year in 2025 that had varying degrees of enjoyment and how fun it was to shoot a gun. Best shooter, top 5, Max Payne 3, Alien Trilogy, Fear, Cruelty Squad, and Star Wars Jedi Knight 2 Jedi Outcast. Yes, that game is a shooter because you primarily have a gun. It counts. You can absolutely just play that game with blasters. It's a great time. And it was kind of humorous putting together that category and being like, yeah, Jedi Outcast, that's definitely classified as a shooter in my eyes. And it's a damn fun one. This top 5 was really fun to put together because I think it's such a varied list that covers a lot of generations, and that's something else that I really loved about this show. And when I was putting together the games in the categories is the generations of games that I get to cover all in one show. And not to toot my own horn or nothing, there's nothing else quite like it. You know, there's a lot of the typical game awards of like, these are my favorite games of the year. That's very normal, and it's a fun and exciting conversation to have at the end of each year because there's so many games that come out each year. So many, and I don't have enough time for that. But I love that I have this unique element of let's put up games from the 90s and games from the 2020s and games from, you know, all in between and throw them against each other. And it's great because you might end up with some unexpected wins that come from the 90s and the early 2000s going up against the modern heavy hitters. And there's just nothing quite like it. Being able to cover so much of gaming history in one show and highlighting my favorites is very, very special. And this was one of those categories where, you know, we have games from so many milestones, so many sort of peak moments of gaming history, where we start with like Alien Trilogy, which we played on the PS1, which was actually very fun. That was a fun game. Got quite hard towards the end, but just sort of in that kind of Doom style shooter approach that I felt was quite fun. And then moving through the years, you know, you get your Jedi Outcast, which is the early 2000s, and then you go into Fear, which is the mid 2000s, with Max Payne 3, which was the early 2010s, and then Cruelty Squad being the most recent in the 2020s. Like, it was just one of those where I was like, wow, this is so cool to just have a category that covers these moments. And we will be giving the winner of this one to our mid 2000s banger Fear. That game is now 20 years old. I played that game around its 20th anniversary. Had a couple of those last year actually, which was accidental, but very enjoyable to go, when did this game come out? Oh, 20 years ago, and just feel another gray hair pop out of the beard. So this game came out when I was 10 years old in 2005, and 20 years on from release, it is exceptional in how it holds up. It has aged incredibly well to go toe-to-toe with modern shooters. I would say it has some of the best gunplay, just how the guns feel. The Fear shotgun, one of the greatest video game weapons now. I see it. I see the vision. Being able to experience those weapons firsthand and how that game felt to play in general, with like the slow-mo that you get to throw in there as well. You had melee capabilities that were just stunning to witness. I was like, wow, I have so much going on here that I didn't even think. You got jump kicks in a first-person shooter. I have jump kicks in a FPS. And that was unreal to me and just so enjoyable. And, you know, I've had a bit of experience because, you know, I played Condemned, and that was very unique as well in terms of some character animations or combat or like how things were approached. Loved my time with Condemned as well. So Fear was something I really appreciated. So that's definitely my favorite, but particular shout outs to this top 5. It's a great list. It's a great list. Cruelty Squad is a unique game, and that is also an understatement in terms of how you want to play that game and how it is classified as a shooter. It's a very, very fun shooter. Max Payne 3. I mean, Max Payne, that series, third-person shooter game experience, just a hell of a lot of fun. We love bullet time, but I'm sorry, Fear takes the slow-mo shooter cake this year, unfortunately, for some. Max Payne 3 fans, I'm sorry, but it goes to Fear this time. And like I said, Alien Trilogy, spoke my piece about it. And then if we want to talk about Jedi Outcast as well, you know, you get, yeah, it's a Star Wars game, you get a lightsaber, but there's so many moments where you would prefer or you should go for the blaster. And it's a great first-person shooter as well. In that sense, I love picking up a Star Wars blaster and shooting it at some stormtroopers, and it just feels great. So that was also a very fun time. Nice, short and sweet list for best shooters, but kind of one of my favorite categories to talk about in that sense. On to the next one. Our next category is a classic. It's the best action adventure. Now, pretty broad category because there's a lot of games that tend to lean more action, some that lean more adventure, others that loosely fit into the genre. Genres are an interesting thing because people have different opinions on which games like fit more appropriately, and I try to look up each game beforehand to see what we're kind of officially dealing with categories and genres. So this list of best action adventure will be The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, The Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker, The Legend of Zelda A Link to the Past, Dishonored Death of the Outsider, Jedi Knight 2 Jedi Outcast, Yakuza 0, Hollow Knight Silksong, American McGee's Alice Madness Returns, Death Stranding 2, and Lollipop Chainsaw. That's my top 10 for best action adventure on the channel. After you get the 3 Legend of Zeldas out the way, which anybody could have told you they'd be on here, even if they didn't like them, you just know that they're on here. There's a pretty nice variety on this list of incredible adventures, with incredible action, with a hero that embarks on a journey that will save all of time and maybe space. And then there are other games on this list that are, you know, maybe you're not a hero who goes out and saves time and space, but you're a girl and you're a cheerleader and you've got a chainsaw and a zombie boyfriend that's only a head. How can that head breathe or speak or maintain consciousness throughout that game? I'm not going to tell you. You're going to play that game and find out for yourself. Lollipop Chainsaw. One of the most unique games I've ever played. A very, very good one, though. Saving time and space, maybe. Kind of. That's up to you. But in this list of top 10 action adventures, there was one of these in particular that outshined the rest. It was a premium adventure, if you will, in terms of the adrenaline-fueled action and the adventure of this particular character, or in this case, characters, plural, Yakuza 0. That's my favorite action adventure in this top 10 list. It's a very, very special game. My introduction to the Yakuza series. Hitting the ground running with a prequel that came out much later than many of the other games, and was kind of created, I guess, as that, like, this is the starting point now before you go into the remakes of 1 and 2 and then the rest of the series. And I'm very happy that I did. Genuinely, I'm very happy that I did, because having played 1 and 2, I might have bounced off a little easier with playing Kiwami instead of Zero. Kiwami as a second game was a much stronger game for me without it. Like, Zero definitely strengthened that game for me in terms of some of the character dynamics, the relationships, and that story continuation. It was still a great game. Don't get me wrong. Kiwami, great game, but I felt like Zero definitely strengthened that experience for me. So I'm glad that I started where I did. It's such a fun game. There's so much going on. I don't even want to be contested on my winner here. Even though, like I said earlier, agonizing to choose some of the winners. There are some staples to the action-adventure genre that usually sit at the pinnacle. You know, these are the best of the genre overall, and this is a very strong top 10 list in my opinion, but I feel happy giving Yakuza 0 a win for action-adventure. It's just like, well, I'm like, I had a good time with the action, I had a good time with the adventure, and I was basically 2 because there's 2 characters and they get their own stories and they're very engaging, gripping stories, and the gameplay element of, you know, being in fights, engaging with that action, just super enjoyable. So Yakuza 0 is going to get the best action adventure win. Next category. Our next category is one that will be seen as controversial. It was controversial in the main Game Awards. It's a category and a genre that always sparks a debate about what classifies as a game that belongs in this genre. And if you haven't guessed it already, the category is Best Indie Game. I have a speech prepared on how I'm going to handle the controversy of the Best Indie Game of 2025. So let's have a look at this one and see what I will say. I will disqualify Expedition 33 due to its mixture of publisher funding and developer backgrounds, which allowed this game to become more than an indie game in my eyes. It afforded them to go beyond what indies usually mean, despite no clear definition on what makes something indie. As another example of this, Bastion is an indie, the first game from Supergiant, but it was published by Warner Brothers. The key distinction here was that Bastion was entirely self-funded, and Warner Brothers only signed on to distribute 4 months before launch, as they wanted the game on consoles. The choice was Microsoft or Warner Brothers for the Xbox release, and Warner Brothers were the most willing to let them continue without interruption. Another example of this is Mouthwashing, which is published by Critical Reflex, but they're an indie-focused publisher specifically. The line continues to blur on an indie definition, and I think that needs context, and it can't simply mean not self-published equals not indie. Critical Reflex helps to put indie games in a spotlight, backing ideas that most wouldn't, and they're a creative collaboration instead of a big bag of money to allow you to hire massive voice talent and resources. I made sure to research this distinction and clarify that my stance is not just removing Expedition 33, but researching other games that are also in this category to see what happened during their development as well, instead of more of a recency bias. So that's my little spiel on Best Indie Game. Expedition 33 is going to be removed from the category due to what I just said, the reasonings above. With that in mind, we have 8 nominations for Best Indie Game. I played 8 indie games on the channel last year. I can count. And the nominations are Hollow Knight Silksong, Bastion, Mouthwashing, Topical, Conversations there we go, naturally, Iron Lung, Cry of Fear, milk inside and outside a bag of milk, inside/outside a bag of milk, Cruelty Squad, and Naver. Those are the 8 games for Best Indie, and I think that's a pretty damn solid list. There might be some people that favor Expedition 33 in an indie category for the definitions that it does fall into, but I think I've given a pretty good reason why I'm going to exclude it from the category. And I loved the Best Indie category every year that I do this little Game Awards thing, because indie games are just so special to me. I have such a fun time playing them. They're just so enjoyable and unique. And that's one of the things that I look for in indie games is they don't have the like unlimited money. They don't have, big publisher funding. They sort of work within some constraints, and there's some creativity to push it without a financial backing. And I don't think that's the only thing that is a distinction between indie games and bigger games. There's certainly, how many people work on the game and, what approach that they take. And I think that, they're not chasing that AAA big cinematic experience, but you could get something that still feels very cinematic and large scale from an indie sense. They're able to kind of take things in a different direction. They focus on different elements of video games instead of ultra realistic graphics, So that's indie games for me. And my favorite, our winner of the best indie game for 2025 out of this honestly really, really incredible list of nominations is going to go to Hollow Knight Silksong. I played Hollow Knight on the channel a few years ago now and have been patiently waiting for the follow-up. Not as long as some other people who played Hollow Knight originally and then have been waiting for Silksong since it was first properly announced to be its own standalone game. And it's been a journey, Many times people have adorned the clown makeup and the wig in pursuit of Silksong when. When will Silksong show up at numerous Game Awards and Summer Games Fests and all of the showcases? When will Silksong appear and grace us with its presence? And it was worth the wait. Absolutely worth the wait. A astounding creative achievement. And they were just enjoying working on the game the whole time, just creatively fueled by their own ideas and just working away on the game, choosing to do things, add more things, remove some stuff, and they're just working, having a great time. Should they have communicated more? Absolutely. Absolutely, they should have. But at the end of the day, they delivered. That silence was worth it in the end. We got given a masterpiece with more to come. In 2026, we are going to be getting our first taste of Silksong's DLC. I'm very, very excited to continue on the adventure of Hornet and see what new areas we can explore with her. But nothing short of a fantastic masterpiece is Hollow Knight Silksong. I'm just grateful that I got to play that game at release. It's always a bit tough playing a new release game on this particular channel because some people have the audience for new games, some don't. It depends on what they play primarily. So the difference between Hollow Knight and Silksong on the channel is obviously going to be different. You've got people that have a lot more nostalgia for the first game and people that have yet to form their own experience and feelings and opinion on Silksong, but it's getting there. It was a great time on the channel and I absolutely don't regret playing it immediately. It's just so much fun to represent an Australian indie game as well. I think is an incredible time. So Hollow Knight Silksong, my clear winner of Best Indie for 2025. Next up, we have the Best RPG category. The role-playing game. I love my role-playing games. And same as last year, there are different types of RPGs. We do have more action RPG. We have computer RPGs. You've got JRPGs. And we just put it in one big umbrella as Best RPG. There are games that are a bit more hardcore with their distinction on what makes an RPG, how detailed, how much we can play a role in a game, and stuff that's a little more light on those elements. Regardless, we didn't play 10 RPGs on the channel last year because that would be a lot, but we got pretty close. Now, keeping in mind the differences of what classifies as an RPG, it does allow me to probably put some games on here that you wouldn't immediately go, okay, role-playing game. Like, for example, in this list of categories, we do have Bastion, Lies of P, both Nier Replicant and Nier Automata, Expedition 33, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, and Final Fantasy Tactics. So we do have 7 beloved RPGs in this category, and some that are more action oriented. We have Final Fantasy Tactics, which is like a tactical RPG, a little bit different, and Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, a bit more of like the CRPG, and Bastion is an interesting one as well. Bastion is, according to the internet, also classified as an RPG, and I would give it to that. You do play a role, there are choices to be made, and the way that you build your character as well, so it's in here. Bastion's also in Best Role-Playing Game. Obviously, given the history of my channel and also my history before YouTube and how much I love role-playing games and my existing backlog of ones that I'm keen to get to, I think that's definitely one of my favorites to play on the channel. They can just also be very, very time consuming in how much content there is in a role-playing game and how deep I want to go into that experience as well. So they do tend to be more of the longer experiences on the channel, especially if they are a little more in-depth in the length of, you've got your extremes, which is more in the Baldur's Gate 3 sense of things, which we did many, many episodes for. And then action RPGs, they can be a little bit lighter. They tend to be more like 20 to 30 episodes. Same with Lies of P, stuff like that. So it's a bit of a balance. Depending on how complex the game is, will be probably the episode count and how deep I want to go into that experience. Given all of that yapping in Best RPG, it's a very tough list because you've got some insane heavy hitters here, and I will go for what I enjoy most about specifically an RPG is how much I as a player can be a character and perform as a character and get into the role. I think that's what I look for the most when I go for Best RPG. How much can I absolutely own the character in the game and just be completely immersed and have fun with the attitude and the voice acting and how we, just play that game both with commentary and in the game itself. And with that in mind, the winner of Best RPG is going to go to Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. I had a fantastic time with that game. It's so enjoyable, so much fun. I played a sort of restored, patched version of this game because I think you kind of need to run it and to have a bit of a, I wouldn't say modern experience with it, but to have like a working experience with it. So while it's not like this sort of true vanilla experience that I've had with the game, I had a working experience with the game, and I chose Malkavian. Now, at the time when I chose Malkavian, I didn't know what the community response to that would be because I jump in the game, had no idea what was going on, and that one spoke to me. I said, that's great. I think I'm going to have fun with that, so I chose it. And then by the time that the episodes started coming out, there was this hesitance from the audience. They were like, nobody told him he's not supposed to do that. You're not allowed to do that. How dare you? And it was quite interesting because there was almost this reaction that I was having where, when gaming communities almost have like unspoken rules or something that's just like, it's like an enforced, you're not supposed to do this until the second playthrough type thing. And I'm not a huge fan of that. I don't really like the sort of, it's universally accepted, you shouldn't do this, because that's limiting, especially in an RPG experience. And I'm glad that I didn't have any of that when choosing my character, because I have zero regrets. They were like, yeah, you're going to be confused. You're not going to know what's going. It's going to ruin your enjoyment. It's going to ruin your immersion. And I had the complete opposite experience to that. And I don't know whether it's like maybe people not knowing who I am as a player on the channel yet, and maybe Vampire brought them into the channel, which is absolutely fair enough. Like, people don't have a read on me yet, so they're going off most people that might just bounce off of Malkavian, something like that. And I understand it, but I need people to trust me more, I think. I need to be trusted. I think maybe people that have been with me for a while maybe would be a little more understanding and open-minded about it. But that's one thing you got to do here. You got to trust Mapocolops to do you right. And if he doesn't, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But for the Malkavian, I think that I handled it pretty damn well. I had so much fun embodying that character and really getting into character with the voice and throwing my own things in there. And it quite similar to the Baldur's Gate 3 experience, as I start trying to add in my own stuff outside of this game with my commentary to, add to it. And I found that to be very, very enjoyable, just being a crazy Malkavian vampire. So huge recommend on that game. Very, very fun time. I would like to revisit it, and I would like to pick a different type of vampire and have a different type of experience with it one of these days. But it's definitely something I would like to revisit, and no regrets about my character choice. I had a great time with that as my best RPG for 2025. Our next category is going to be for the best voice acting, which is a great list in terms of some of these games. I think there's games in particular that you don't expect the voice acting to go as hard as it does, and sometimes less is more for some of these games as well. There's a mixture here where there's voices of really stacked casts of so many different talents lending their abilities, and then some where it's minimal but very, very effective and enjoyable. I am obsessed with voice acting. I love the performances that people can bring to these characters. I tend to have a pretty keen ear in terms of listening for voices that I recognize and trying to pin them when I recognize it, in terms of that's this person and that's that person. Sometimes I get it wrong because there are some that have a little bit of similar delivery, or I get confused on my voice actors, but it's one of my favorite things to do. So voice acting is something that I appreciate in my games quite a lot. Going into this one for voice acting, we have our 10 nominations of Yakuza 0, Clair Obscur Expedition 33, Nier Automata, and by extension, Nier Replicant, Death Stranding 2, Final Fantasy Tactics, Lies of P, Bastion, Jedi Knight, Jedi Outcast, and Dishonored, Death of the Outsider. Those are my favorites of the voice acting for our 2025 games. And to sort of talk a little bit about some of these, that's what I was kind of referring to, like Bastion. Not a lot of voice acting, but Logan Cunningham, he can talk and he can read me bedtime stories, and I'm going to have a great time. And that was Bastion for me. Just an incredible voice that takes you through that entire journey, just this narration, and minimal yet effective. It's sort of like this constant vocal companion throughout the course of the game that I really, really loved. Another thing about this list is it includes Final Fantasy Tactics, and the Ivalice Chronicles release, as this is a remaster, gave the game voice acting. It didn't have voice acting before this. I think the War of the Lions release on PSP might have had some voiced cutscenes, perhaps? I think so. And this release is kind of expanded upon. There is voice acting in all of just like the in-game cutscenes, because War of the Lions added some cool art style, like specific story moments. But yeah, War of the Lions, while it had some, Ivalice Chronicles was a full voice acting cast for so many of the characters, and I really enjoyed that being my first experience with the game, because I think that's something that a lot of people growing up with Tactics would have their own voices in their own head of what these characters sound like. I didn't get that as much, but even so, they chose some very, very good talents to take on these characters, and I think they sold it very, very well. I didn't feel like it was an unnecessary addition whatsoever. Definitely saved me a lot of time. Whenever there's an unvoiced game, I have to warm up the vocal cords quite a lot, but not having to do that and just be able to listen to some really, really talented actors perform these characters was very enjoyable. So, you know, games that have minimal voice acting, games that get voice acting in remasters, and then obviously you have games that have stacked casts. You've got Yakuza 0 with, you know, voiced in Japanese. I didn't go for, you know, there's no English dub experience for me to have there. There's games like Nier Automata that has a bit of conflict surrounding English versus Japanese dub, and I've only experienced the English version of that game. There's a lot of different ways to experience voice acting in video games depending on the dub as well. But all that aside, you know, conflict over English and Japanese or other languages, there's a winner, and it doesn't matter about any of that, because my winner of Best Voice Acting is not going to be announced by me, actually. It's going to be... I think we have someone who is going to announce it instead of me, so let's take a look at that.
Oh, I hope you are enjoying the Mapocolops Game Awards. It's Rich Keeble here, the voice of Monoko, the main character of Expedition 33, and my, what lovely feat. I mean, what lovely awards tonight. How invigorating. Permit me to help as I present the winner for Best Voice Acting. Now things are getting spicy. Ow, ow, wow. This award goes to Claire Obscure Expedition 33. Well, of course it does. Congratulations for those who come after. Now I've got a duel with Golgra later, so it's your turn to shine. Okay, bye.
Thank you so much to Rich Keeble for lending his voice and talent as Monoko to confirm our winner of Best Voice Acting, Claire Obscure Expedition 33. That was really fun to listen to and to watch when I received that, and very cool to put into this video as well. So beaming about that is great. And I mean, it's a pretty tough one to beat. There's a very talented cast in there of known individuals and some new blood coming in. For example, Rich Keeble being someone that I was not familiar with, and I just wanted to include that because Monoko in Expedition 33 is such a joy. Very, very enjoyable to listen to. So Expedition 33, my favorite voice acting for 2025.
What is it that separates games and nominations? The nominations have gained awards, accolades. The final celebrations they earned at the end of last year. They still echo within me.
I feel like I'm losing hope in my body and my soul, and the sky, it looks so ominous. And as time comes to a halt, silence starts to overflow. My cries are inconspicuous. Tell me, God, are you punishing me? Is this the price I'm paying for my past mistakes? This is my redemption song. I need you more than ever right now. Can you hear me
Let that yawn out. There's no pretending. I will hold you and protect you. So let love warm you till the morning. I'll stay with you by your side. Close your tired eyes and I'll wait. And soon I'll see your smile in a dream. And I won't wait before you go. And I still hear your heartbeat.
An advantage.
Our next category is best gameplay. How engaging was the game that we played in the 2025? How are we being told a story in an interactive way? And why is the video game the best way for that story to be told? You know, we want to mash A immediately at the main menu, and if we're not being presented with gameplay straight away, it must be crap, right? Gameplay is the only reason we play a video game, and certainly for nothing else. But of course not. Gameplay is just one of the factors, but it is also, I would say, the core factor of a video game experience is you do want to feel engaged while playing. There is an element of, you know, are we watching a game? Are we playing a movie? What sort of experience are we having? I think that certain games get skewed in terms of this sort of battle between game and cutscenes. Is some people will, you know, brush off a game and say, it was a movie. But then, you know, there's like, you know, 5-6 hours of cutscenes, which is a couple of movies in there. But what they fail to sort of weigh up against that time is the 20 to 30 hours of gameplay. You know, it's not primarily cutscenes. And I think games that have a lot of cutscenes almost end up being shamed for doing so by the gameplay enjoyers. It's a constant battle that, you know, games that want to take time for cutscenes and tell a story, they struggle with the attention span of I want to touch the controller and press button and smack thing. It's a fine line to balance, and I think there's games that definitely give you a lot of gameplay and then reward you with a little treat of a cutscene, and I like that. I like the balance of have a big gameplay segment, have a story segment, but there's also so many different approaches in how they want to put the story and litter it throughout the gameplay. There are some games that do have notorious cutscene length. I enjoy it regardless because I like the story that can be told to you in a cutscene and the story that can be told to you in a game. And with gameplay, naturally, I do have a list. I've got 10 favorites on the ones that were just the most enjoyable to play, the most engaging, ones that I had a lot of fun with. And that top 10 is Yakuza 0, Max Payne 3, Expedition 33, Nier Automata, Silksong, Bastion, Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker, Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, Luigi's Mansion, and Fear. A lot of games on here that were just fun, and a lot that were very, very technical and engaging as well. They had just ones where they give you a lot of systems that you can explore and go in depth on, but others that are just like, I'm a guy with a vacuum cleaner and I'm getting ghosts in a mansion. And it's Resident Evil for kids in the mansion, that stuff is really, really fun. So there's games that are just like, this was just a fun, enjoyable time, and ones that just give you like so much, and it can be complex, and you can take the time to learn systems and build characters and, equip your characters for combat and stuff like that. Gameplay is such a massive variety, and only highlighting 10 specifically that I loved the most. But I think in terms of the games that I played on the channel last year, I enjoyed pretty much all of them. There's only a couple of games that I didn't have as much of a good time with, and that tended to be on a couple of game day streams, because you never know what you're getting into when a game lands on the wheel, and you play a PlayStation 1 game and it's not aged as good as it could have, and I wouldn't be as frustrated playing it maybe back then as I do now. Some of those games, they can, they struggle to be modern, and I think that's when you look at games that sort of have more of a universally accepted control scheme for how you navigate and shoot and all that kind of stuff. A lot of older games they were still figuring it out. They're like, the characters have different buttons for the strafing and the moving and aiming and all of that kind of stuff, and you have to kind of adapt to that system. So it's not hugely the game's fault, but for the most part, I really enjoyed myself on basically all of the games played on the channel. Like 99%, maybe 98, maybe 97, maybe 96% of the games played on the channel for 2025. But on this list, I do have one particular favorite in terms of the gameplay, and the winner is going to be Hollow Knight Silksong. It was a treat. I had such a good time with it. I loved the crest inclusion. I like how you could change up your movesets and abilities and all of the tools, and the way that just Silksong raises the bar. It takes the Hollow Knight foundation and you can use that to just jump off and go so much further. I think that there's, we've got people that played Silksong as their first experience with this series and kind of jumped into the hype, and then you've got people that learned Hollow Knight and then jumped into Silksong and got a bit of a wake-up call with, new directional movement and combat and, challenges that you face. And we all get to sort of learn and adapt to Hornet's movement, combat, and skill set in different ways based on, if we played Hollow Knight beforehand or not. Regardless of that, though, just very, very enjoyable. I loved how much freedom we had to really equip ourselves for not only traversing the dangerous environments, but also fighting all of those enemies and those bosses, and just so many unforgiving moments, and just learning how to overcome those challenges. And, seeing where you start at the beginning of Silksong and seeing where you end up at the end, I think is a journey that I'm very grateful that I can record these experiences, and I can see where I started and where I ended up. And that's something that I truly appreciate, seeing how the challenge of the gameplay is initially presented to me and how I learn and, adapt and overcome those challenges by the end of it. I'm super excited for more Silksong and to see how else I'm going to be punished. Will we get the true Path of Pain experience in the upcoming Silksong DLC and put our navigation and traversal skills to the ultimate test? Maybe. But Silksong is my favorite gameplay of 2025. Following on to best gameplay is a familiar follow-up category, that is best boss fights. I think that, it's always a category that deserves its own spotlight. Gameplay, there's so many levels to it in terms of, what is the best exploration, just combat, all of these sort of different areas of how a game can play. I do tend to just highlight overall gameplay and then, boss fights. It's a staple. It's an absolute staple of most video games, and we'd be here all day if I kept subcategorizing so many other categories. So sometimes I like to throw on a little additional piece, and best boss fights is one of those where we specifically hone in on that element of gaming. My top 10 for best boss fights is gonna be the following: Lies of P, Expedition 33, Silk Song, Yakuza 0, Nier Automata, Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker, Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, Nier Replicant, Lollipop Chainsaw, and Death Stranding 2. All 10 of these games have amazing boss fight encounters. So many creative ways to present boss fights as well, and how we go about fighting them, whether it's just, straight combat, different creative ways, there's a bit more strategy to the fights, and hard to limit it to just 10 as well, because a lot of games that I played that didn't make this list also had some very, very fun and enjoyable boss fights. So we got to cap it off at 10. But out of all of these games, there is one in particular that I enjoyed more than the rest, and that game was Lies of P. Both its base game and its Overture DLC, just so many cool bosses, and following on with that From Software inspired take, there's a big focus on the boss fights. There's a lot of enemies to face in these types of games, and they're not sort of only boss fights, but it is something that people tend to focus on, and I've spoken in the last award show about that as well in regards to From Software, because we did have Armored Core 6 and Shadow of the Erd Tree making an appearance last year, and we know how From Software do boss fights. I think Lies of P did that sort of gameplay experience justice, very much so. I had a great time facing off against numerous bosses in Lies of P. Specifically, I really enjoyed I feel like I'm gonna struggle with the pronunciation, but I really, really loved Marchiona. Yes, Marchiona. Marchiona is the pronunciation that I was thinking of. You've got Luxartia as well, which I think was is in my top 3. Just that whole sequence is just mind-blowing. I'm only going to say names, and I'm trying not to get into super specifics of why, obviously for spoiler reasons, but there's so many names I could throw out there. The final boss of the Overture DLC, of course. I will not name them just because, but if you know, you know. I don't think I think maybe when you come across you've got the big monsters, those are the boss fights I don't tend to enjoy the most. That's not my style of boss fight in those games that I tend to enjoy. I love something that feels a little more even in terms of stature. They can be taller and bigger and stronger than my character, but when I'm fighting against the giant beast things and the camera's going up its ass and it jumps to the other side of the arena and you run all the way over just for it to swipe you off the ground, I can respect the spectacle, and sometimes I do have a better time than others. But for the most part, I love either a 1v1 duel with a humanoid character, something along those lines. Those are the elements of boss fights that really shine for me. But shout out to the Black Rabbit Brotherhood as well in their inclusion as Lies of P's gank fight, going up against numerous enemies in one encounter, and I enjoyed the time that I spent with the Black Rabbit Brotherhood as a result. So Lies of P for Best Boss Fights of 2025, and I think it absolutely deserves the spot because there were so many bosses in that game that would push me to also like look at my current equipment, change my weapons, change my approach, and I did that in Lies of P more than I had done for From Software games previously. It was something about Lies of P in particular where I just felt inspired and motivated to use so many different tools at my disposal instead of, I like this sword, I'm going to stay with this sword for so long before I like another sword and change that sword for like another 20 episodes. Lies of P was like, I have so many different things I could be using all at once and I would just kind of rotate them in and out, and that was something I really appreciated about Lies of P, and specifically using that to approach the boss fights. And now we're moving into some of the bigger categories where our next one is Best Art Direction. I am a gigantic fan of art direction, as we all should know by now. Being a creative person, being an artist, I always look for how games are created, from the concept art to the character designs to what we get to find within the game, graphic design, video game advertisements within the worlds. There's so many bits and pieces that, you know, create a world and really put it together. So art direction is a very special one for me. We have 10 beautiful looking games in this category, and we're going to start off with Silksong as our first nomination, Clair Obscur Expedition 33, Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, Lies of P, Death Stranding 2, Alice Madness Returns, Bastion, Nier Automata, Dishonored Death of the Outsider, and Final Fantasy Tactics. A varied list that showcases its art direction in many different ways, in many different styles. Some games are animated and filled with art in the way that they are built. If we're thinking, you know, the hand-drawn animation element, some games have themes of art and creativity interwoven with the world itself. And then we also have different sorts of aesthetics, like with Final Fantasy Tactics and Bastion being a little bit more of like pulling the camera out for a specific camera angle, the way that we view that world and that art. So as a big art enjoyer and appreciator, it's tough to pick just 10, but even harder to pick a winner. And the winner that I've settled on for Best Art Direction is Expedition 33, a game that is absolutely brimming with art in its veins. The way that painting and writing and creativity, music, all of these different creative forces and the powers that can manifest from those creative passions is really, really amazing. To see how Expedition 33 handles creativity, I think, is really, really beautiful from like a in-universe and a meta commentary perspective. There's not much that I can say about this within the context of the game for spoiler reasons, but I will say the safe stuff is, you know, our main target that we take on in Expedition 33 is called the Paintress, you know, so I guess there's some form of paint element in there, right? It's probably got something to do with painting. That aside, genuinely, the way that from start to finish, Clair Obscur Expedition 33 gives us creativity as such a force of passion is admirable, and that's something that I really, really appreciate about it. So it's a tough category because there's so many games that I feel like deserve a win in this category, but I gotta go with my heart at the end of the day, and Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is the winner. Keeping on the same subject of creativity and art and all of these sorts of elements that can help build a world The best soundtrack is our next category. Music may be just my single favorite thing about video games on that very tough list of, what I enjoy and what I look for in terms of, the narrative and the lore and the art direction and the music and all that kind of stuff. Music is probably the element that I favor the most. That is something that sticks with me a lot because I will be listening to those video game soundtracks for hours and hours and hours well after finishing the game. It's the most persistent element of a video game for me. While I will always keep video games that I love in my mind and I think about them, and I, before YouTube used to replay a lot of nostalgic favorites out of comfort, the element that would always stay with me outside of that was the music. I'd be able to chuck on playlists whenever I was doing something else. So that is an element that is very present for video games for me. And I think that's why it's one of my favorite things. Usually video game soundtracks are this is what you listen to the most in your year. Whenever there's the music recaps, it's always video game composers and their soundtracks. And I had quite a few favorites. Something that actually was kind of cool about that is YouTube gave me a recap, and some of my most repeated themes and pieces of music that came up were from games I played in that year. For example, Nier Replicant was a big repeating element because I played that earlier in the year, so it had enough time to kind of stay on on my playlists. And Mouthwashing, the title theme for Mouthwashing, was another one of those as well. And of course, mixtures of Woodkid's involvement with Death Stranding 2, and we also had Expedition 33, of course. So there was a lot of games being played last year that ended up being in my top 5 or top 10 most repeated tracks of the year. So that's a cool thing to think about. And then we will also talk about the nominations, because just because my YouTube said I listen to it a lot, it might not mean that it's a winner of the category, believe it or not. That's gonna be the tough thing to talk about. Is it's Mouthwashing, I will say, is not nominated in the top 10. However, the main title theme was one of my most listened to tracks of last year, and it comes up against weighing up one particular track that I loved so much against a whole entire soundtrack, the embodiment of music that's even in there and being presented to you. So it's a tough one to choose from, especially someone so musically passionate as I am. All that aside, we will now confirm our nominations. We have Yakuza 0, Hollow Knight Silk Song, Nier Automata, Final Fantasy Tactics, Expedition 33, Nier Replicant, Death Stranding 2, Lies of P, Twilight Princess, and Bastion. Very, very powerful games with incredible and addicting pieces of music. Just at the end there, Bastion, straight off the bat, while Transistor is a game that I played in 2026 now, and it's not part of this show, having now experienced 2 of Supergiant's games with both Bastion and Transistor, they have a style. The way that they include the vocal element in their songs is very, very powerful, but not overdone, because they have a really good instrumental tracks, and then they follow it up with some hard-hitting vocals. So Bastion was a very special one to include in this list, but all of them just absolutely astounding for almost the entirety of the soundtrack. Now, I don't want to keep us in suspense for too long, because I am going to be very, very honest and say this was the easiest category for me to actually pick a winner on. And I don't know if that's surprising or not, considering the ridiculously amazing games that are in this list. There's obviously some very notable soundtracks that I've just listed, but the reason why this was so easy is because the winner is Nier Automata. And if I could almost give a joint award and just say Keiichi Okabe for work on Nier Replicant and Nier Automata, I would do it. But I would choose Automata as the one winning game because it's simply the greatest soundtrack I've ever heard in my life, maybe, you know. This isn't even just best soundtrack of 2025. It's kind of just like, this is the best soundtrack, and is anything ever going to top this after that? I don't know. This is coming from a massive Final Fantasy enjoyer that has put those soundtracks at the top tier of everything, along with Yoko Shimomura's Kingdom Hearts work and so many others. Expedition 33 is even in this category, and that soundtrack is nothing to scoff at whatsoever. There's so many tracks for that game, not to mention the just incredible talent and unique sounds and musical cues that went into Expedition 33. And with that in mind, Nier Automata just clears it. It just clears it easily. That's how easy it was for me to pick, even with such mind-blowing soundtracks like Expedition 33 going up against it. I will say that before I played Automata, Expedition 33 was probably going to be the one to win because of just the staggering amount of tracks on that soundtrack and how good it was. I was like, this feels like this would be, you know, the winner. Nier Automata came in and just absolutely decimated any chance of that, to be quite honest. And it was one of those situations where I went, damn, this game came in really late into the 2025 awards, my last game that's eligible for it, and it's just going to clean up musically. But yeah, music, it means so much to me. I will be listening to Nier Automata's soundtrack on my deathbed. I'll be playing it out loud for everyone to hear because I don't need to have any final words. The soundtrack will speak it for me. That's Nier Automata's soundtrack. Now we move on to the next category. The next two categories are actually brand new to tonight's Game Awards. Ones that I was thinking of including some more unique categories that focus on very specific things, and they're closely related, but I wanted to separate them for a good reason. This category is Best Atmosphere, just the general feeling and vibe of the game. How effective that game is at pulling you into the world. It's basically like almost best immersion in that sense, but a little bit different. So how good it felt for me to just like navigate those worlds, be in those spaces, and how good it was, whether it was a place that I wanted to be in or not, you know what I mean? So Best Atmosphere, we have a top 10 list here of The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, and The Wind Waker, Death Stranding 2, Iron Lung, Cry of Fear, Bastion, Abode 2, Mouthwashing, Deus Ex Invisible War, and Expedition 33. Games that just oozed a level and feeling of atmosphere where, if for better or for worse, you could not think about absolutely anything else. You've got like your intense psychological atmosphere of like Iron Lung and Cry of Fear, where those games can actually, they sit with you, not necessarily in a positive way. Cry of Fear especially is something where atmospherically that is oppressing, you know, and depressing and fucking exhausting. And then you've got games that, you know, give immaculate atmosphere in other ways that are able to, you know, pull you in and give you that feeling of being on a journey without the stress element. My winner out of these 10 is going to be Death Stranding 2, On the Beach. The atmosphere of walking the Australian continent. Realistic walking to work simulator in Australia. Every time I walk outside, that's exactly what it looks like over here. And that's a fact, no word of a lie. We get harassed by ghosts, if we hop on any sort of public transport. The rain here, it's acid. It's why we all are so wrinkled. It's why we're all so old looking. Fries the vocal cords. So yeah, Death Stranding 2 was a very immersive adventure as everyday Australia. But on a real note, genuinely, the atmosphere of Death Stranding and Death Stranding 2, of course, are just something that are a little bit unmatched for me. I loved spending time doing so many deliveries, leveling up a lot of the shelters to maximum level. I didn't do that as much in Death Stranding 2 as I did in the first game because there was simply more to do, and also a lot of it that was more challenging and more time consuming, and it was an extracurricular sort of part of the game that I was not really needing to do. I played the director's cut of the first game, and that had some actual additional content and other things to pursue, which kind of motivated me. And Death Stranding 2, not as much. I don't know if the director's cut that we'll be releasing will sort of include anything, and I'm lucky. It's lucky that Death Stranding 2 is, getting that PC release finally. So I hope that those that haven't watched that playthrough yet get to experience the game on PC and then can go back and watch that playthrough, because Death Stranding 1, obviously, it had had a couple of years, so that playthrough performed pretty well. Death Stranding 2, not as much, sadly. That was one of the new releases that I feel kind of went underviewed, undervalued, and under the algorithm radar, sadly. I got 30,000 views on my reaction trailer to Death Stranding 2, and I couldn't even get close to that on the first episode of the Let's Play. So, yikes! Regardless of that, I had such a good time with Death Stranding 2. Don't regret it at all. From start to finish, I loved the atmosphere. I loved way more about that game than just the atmosphere, but I wanted to at least be able to spotlight that game here, because there isn't a Game Awards for 2021 on the channel. I did my first one in 2022, and when I think about 2021, I think that would be an impossible list of games for me to even try and categorize. Don't make me do it. But Death Stranding 1 didn't get a chance to really get its flowers, so Death Stranding 2 gets to appear and claim an award instead. And now we'll move on to the next part of this category. Our follow-up category to Atmosphere is similar, and that's why they're together. This is Best Vibes, and we'll just say Best Vibes, but it's overall like the best feeling game that has an effective atmosphere that I would like to be in, games that just have the best vibes, dog. I want to go to that world, and I wouldn't mind spending some time in there, and if there's something that's not so great about that particular world, just that's happening off screen in my life. I'm in the good zone. I'm in the vibe zone of these games, and it's just a shorter category, and it's just a fun one. Is the vibes. Top 5: Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, Jedi Knight 2, Jedi Outcast, Star Wars Rogue Squadron, and Yakuza 0. Most unique top 5 list of the night. You're like, when will you ever see those 5 games in a list together? Only here, baby. Only in the Mapocolops channel will you get these 5 games in a list together. The vibes of these games are truly special. Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, need I say more? Grungy, early 2000s America with vampires. I loved just walking around the cities in that game, the music that was playing, the overall sort of aesthetic. I don't know if I would be a vampire, or just a resident who's just enjoying it, hanging out in the Blade nightclub. I don't know. Probably just, narrowly avoiding getting turned into a vampire, and just, I'm nostalgic for the early 2000s. Take me back, I guess, And then on the other hand, you've got 2 Star Wars games in here, because, yeah, there's a war going on, but I'm on that planet just hanging out, farming, riding whatever the fuck they got going over there. I got the farting Eopies. I'm a farmer. Maybe I got a little air speeder and I fly it around. You always want to be in Star Wars, as long as I'm not getting like shot by a stormtrooper, you know? And then Yakuza 0, it was the late 80s. I didn't get to experience the 80s. Let me experience the late 80s in the economic bubble of Japan. And I can just, you know, karaoke to my heart's content. Nothing wrong with that. And then our final one that I would reference here is The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, which is the winner of my best vibes category, because how could it not be? Like, you get on your little boat. The ocean is the most beautiful ocean you've ever seen. I'm like, I wish all water could look like that. Maybe a little more realistic, a little less cartoony. But to just get on and sail, yeah, it's just a very beautiful time. I love my adventure in Wind Waker. Just getting on the boat, picking my wind direction, and just sailing. You know, it will just forget about the monsters that attack me along the way. There's just something about that. And that comes from me with, like, I have a fear of the ocean. I don't want to swim out there. I don't want a ship to sink. I don't want any danger. I don't like going out on boats. I've done it once, and, you know, will I do it again? Maybe. But it's not something that I actively pursue. But there's just a feeling that comes with Wind Waker. Link on his little talking boat, and we're just checking out destinations and having a fun time, and just the island that Link lives on feels like such a great time. I'd like to go there. The vibes are good. Best vibes. Wind Waker. We're now onto the big stuff. We are moving in to the final awards that lead us into the best games of the year. Before we get to those, however, we are going to cover the best narrative, the story, the world building, the lore, all of that beautiful, beautiful stuff that I think a lot of you in this community have come here for. There's a big community that I'm very, very proud of. All of you with such a love and appreciation for the worlds that we get to spend time in. And the story is such an important way for us to remain invested and see things through to the end. With our top 10 category, we have Death Stranding 2, Nier Automata, Silksong, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, Expedition 33, Yakuza 0, Alice Madness Returns, Bastion, Final Fantasy Tactics, and Lies of P. There is also an honorable mention here. This is the first honorable mention, and it's also going to be, I guess, the one and only appearance of this particular game. It's an expansion, and it's kind of the only expansion to really be here at this award show, and that is Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker. That is an expansion to the long-running, critically acclaimed MMORPG Play Now, up to level 70 with the base game Heaven's Ward and Stormblood for free. Beautiful free trial. Play it. Pick a class. Pick a character. Play a game. Live in the world of Final Fantasy XIV. Hashtag unsponsored. Just passionate about the love of the game. Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker will just have an honorable mention in this list in terms of narrative. And just pretend that it also basically had an honorable mention in almost every category. Almost every single one. Because Endwalker is so close to perfection, you know, and the Final Fantasy XIV expansions as well, they are quite large enough to be like their own games, but the only reason it's not really being nominated in specific categories is on that basis that it's not its own thing, it's not its own game, it is an expansion to an existing game, and it's made very powerful because of what came before it as well. So there's a whole can of worms there. Honorable mention to Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker. Probably spoke about Final Fantasy XIV more than I will speak about the rest of the games in the category. That's how much I liked it. But in regards to this one, I will also say, I don't think the winner of this one will be expected. I don't know how we've gone so far. There's always something that I really love about the Game Awards show and the awards as well, is in regards to the games that I, give the awards to and call out the winners. It's always fun to read the chat, and we're live reacting to it together as this premiere goes off to see people guessing the awards and getting either surprised or, they're like, I knew it sort of thing. That's always a fun reaction. I think this one might be one of the more unexpected winners, because I will be giving Best Narrative to Final Fantasy Tactics. That's right. The 90s are back, baby. We're so back. Every other narrative that has come since that time, Final Fantasy Tactics is going to be my winner of Best Narrative. I fell in love with that game from the minute that you start the game and get the opening cutscene. It's really, really great, I will say. I grew up with Final Fantasy Tactics Advance on the Game Boy, which was a very different game with a very different type of story, and so I had a tiny bit of tactics exposure in that sense. I'd played a spin-off game. I mean, Tactics is already a spin-off, but I played the Advance version. And Final Fantasy Tactics on PS1 never released in the PAL region, so Europe and Australia never got Tactics. That was a Japan and NTSC region US exclusive. Tactics got released on PSP as the War of the Lions version, which I've had sitting on my shelf for well over 10 years now on my to-do list. Same with my other Final Fantasy games. And the Ivalice Chronicles was the perfect opportunity for me to finally do it. And I am very grateful for the fact that, I was able to pause Final Fantasy XIV, dive into Final Fantasy Tactics, and then play also the Ivalice themed content in Final Fantasy XIV after that as well. That was kind of one of the main motivators. I was like, cool, there's content related to that setting. I will work it into my schedule. And Ivalice is one of my favorite Final Fantasy settings as someone who played Tactics Advance, as someone who grew up playing Final Fantasy XII on the PS2 as well. So there's also Vagrant Story that's on my to-do list, which is kind of an offshoot that is apparently also still in Ivalice as well. So that's something I'd like to experience one day. Circling back to Best Narrative for a second, the category that we're in. Best Narrative for Final Fantasy Tactics was, it just hooked me from the very beginning. The way that the story is told, the way that it's inspired from, the real life War of the Roses and Shakespearean tragedy. And there's just so many elements and inspirations that goes into it. And it was such an effective political story with, our two nations at war, but what's happening behind the scenes on both sides to, keep fanning the flames of war. But the character interactions and the dynamics and the relationships between all of the moving pieces in the War of the Lions was just an absolute joy from start to finish. I'm so glad I finally got to witness peak with Final Fantasy Tactics. And just crazy to think about that 1997 was when Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy Tactics came out. Two bangers in 1 year. I grew up with 7, of course, and then I've been able to circle back around for Tactics. It's this weird moment of, there's the diverging pathway of which political Final Fantasy game in 1997 am I going to play? The eco-terrorists or the fantasy War of the Lions? What are we going to do? And just to celebrate a Final Fantasy game here in Best Narrative brings me great joy, because Final Fantasy stories are near and dear to my heart, and this was a brand new one for me, and I get to fully ingest it and understand it as a grown adult, and I think I truly appreciated it because of that. And that is my award for Best Narrative. We'll move on to the next one. This category is actually technically not a category for just this brief moment of the show, where I wanted to interject a specific list top 10 favorite Mapocolops game day streams, because almost every single week from Bastion onwards, we span that wheel and we landed on a random game and we played that the following week. And those streams ranged from kind of like 5 to 10 hours, depending on which type of game it was. And we would sit there and just, some people would spend the whole day with me. Just, that's kind of the intention for it. Just sit there as a bit of like a community hangout, play a whole game. Just imagine that we're all on the couch together playing a game, talking shit, or having a good time sort of thing. Sometimes people kind of put it on before bed and they drift off to it. Some other people, they wake up and they go, you're playing. So it's this interesting like in and out for some, and then for others they're able to just kind of chill with it on in the background. And I really like the Mapocolops game day streams in that sense, and the way that it allows me to select a list of shorter games and have a dedicated time slot for playing them in ways that I probably wouldn't normally do on the channel, or they would be like games that I would always just keep putting off. I'd be like, yeah, I'd like to play that, but this is more of a priority, or yeah, I feel like playing this more. It's a great little side project, and I think it's gone really, really well. So I'm grateful for it. The game day streams are enjoyable. They go public for non-YouTube members after 1 month, and then I post them as their own video, so it sends out the notification, and the full playlist is on my channel. And I just think it's going to be like a great resource that'll only continue to get better, as it's like a whole video just for one game, instead of waiting for a playthrough, because these games would end up only really being like 4 to 5 episode Let's Plays if I did it that way, so I get to actually just one full video, there you go, and that's great. And I have a list of my top 10, my 10 favorites that I got to play, and there's no winner in this one. There's not a top one. It's just kind of specifically highlighting the 10 that I enjoyed the most. And for that list, that was Iron Lung, Naver, Luigi's Mansion, Cruelty Squad, Lollipop Chainsaw, Rogue Squadron, Bastion, Abode 1 and 2, Fear, and Mouthwashing. Just a great variety in this list. There's, the horror games we got to play. There's also the one VR game that I got to play, the VR Escape Room, and then just some other really nice ones. Lollipop Chainsaw sort of coming out of nowhere there. Naver being just this absolutely gorgeous indie adventure, and yeah, just great to also throw in some Star Wars in there as well. I think Mouthwashing and Fear are two horror experiences that Fear especially I was happy to play for the long runtime, because it was less like punishing your psyche and more like a engaging action shooter while also having the horror elements alongside. But that was great. So those were my favorites that I got to play. Iron Lung being probably the shortest game day stream we might ever do. A short game that was great for people to watch. My navigating the blood ocean. It was really, really, really a nice time. I think Abode 1 and 2 was quite unique as well, because that was one that I didn't have the chat for at all, just to like even glance at. I try and keep my chat interaction at a minimum to focus on the game, but Abode was one where I was cut off from the chat entirely as well. So I'm just kind of like bumbling around the escape rooms, trying to figure stuff out, hoping that I'm, positioned in the right way. And obviously there's probably a better setup that I could have, but I think it's ridiculous. An opportunity for me to put on the VR headset with my googly eyes again is always a treat. So Abode was a really nice immersive adventure to include in that one. So I just wanted to highlight 10 of my favorite game day streams, and if you're interested, there's a full playlist on the channel, and it's something we have been continuing to do well into 2026 and for the foreseeable future. There's a lot of shorter games that fit on that list, and a lot that, due to just the random spin of the wheel, I don't have to like try and sort a priority. It's just which game that we land on, and I get pleasantly surprised with a lot of the results. So feel free to check them out. I would love it if you did. But now let's get into the next category. Teasing you just a little bit longer before we get into our Game of the Channel and Game of the Year awards, I have decided to place in 2 more new categories this year. Keep it fresh and exciting. You know, we can't just repeat the same thing. And then the best music and the best gameplay. Sometimes we go and do something different, and I throw a curveball of a category, and it comes to me in a dream, and I go, that's a great idea, and I'm going to put it in. And so these next 2 categories is going to be Best 90s Game and Best 2000s Game, celebrating a particular decade. And again, only on the Mapocolops channel, by the way, where you don't need to be anywhere else. 43 played games on the channel. And do I get good sleep? We don't have to talk about that. I play video games and I do it for you, and I also do it for me, but I do it for you as well. And something that is very unique about this channel is reflecting on the year, and we go, wow, I got to play almost an even spread of video games from the 90s, 2000s, 2010s, and 2020s, like all kind of around like approximately 8 to 10 in each decade. That's amazing to be able to like reflect on particular gaming years and generations instead of, you know, I'm not a channel that only plays new releases. I'm not a channel that only plays older games. I try and strike a balance, and realistically, I can probably fit 2 to 3 brand new games in a year, despite the fact that the channel is not built for that kind of new release schedule. Especially Death Stranding 2 and Silksong that were so close together, and then you've also got Silent Hill F and Metal Gear Solid Delta, which came out at the same time, and I still haven't played them because the time keeps moving, and you know, I sit in my chair and I blink and I go, it's 1 week later, and I feel like I haven't moved, and that kind of stuff is really scary because I want to do as much as I can and play as much as I can and give as much as I can to this channel. And sometimes that's not possible. I need to have a little bit of a break. Sometimes time is moving too slowly. But I meant to say time is moving too fast, and I'm moving too slowly, you know? So those things, they just don't line up. And also just the fact that putting out so much content gives people too much choice, and then the videos don't do so well, and then the algorithm says your channel sucks, and then nobody gets recommended by videos anymore, and it's just kind of like that sort of spiral that takes place. But the fact that I can look back at this year in particular and say, like, holy shit, I played over 40 games, to just deliver that to everybody makes me very proud. And to celebrate some particular decades, I think is also really cool as well. That's why we're doing Best 90s and Best 2000s Game. We're not doing Best 2010s, and we're not doing Best 2020s, because at that point, like, some of the games that we played, they start to include games that are already, you know, kind of got a guaranteed win. Not to like say too much in that regard, but it's just kind of like, there's not much point, especially with some of the more modern releases. It's I just find it more interesting to focus on the categories that are older, 90s and 2000s especially, because those are games that can struggle to go up against the modern heavy hitters in terms of some of these other categories, like the music and the gameplay and stuff like that. So I want to be able to give them a category, give them their flowers, and limit them to a particular time period. So all of that yapping aside, Best 90s Game, we have a list. And like I said, the fact that we're able to really represent decades in such a great way is astounding. I'm very grateful and lucky to be able to do something like this. So for the Best 90s Game, we have Star Wars Jedi Knight, Dark Forces 2. Star Wars Dark Forces 2 Jedi Knight. Dark Forces 2. Alien Trilogy, Fifth Element, Fade to Black, Xena Warrior Princess, Rogue Squadron, Clock Tower, Nightmare Creatures, Link to the Past, and Final Fantasy Tactics. So, really, really cool list. Games in here that, probably wouldn't get nominated in another category, and that's okay, Nightmare Creatures gets a shout out by some miracle, because that is the list of the 90s games that I played in completion. Fifth Element and Fade to Black, they're in this list. I didn't actually finish those games. I didn't finish them. There's also Roscoe McQueen Firefighter Extreme. Didn't finish that game either. Also from the 90s, didn't even make the list. Sorry, Roscoe, but that's our 10. And the best 90s game out of that list, it's definitely Nightmare Creatures. Final Fantasy Tactics is going to be my winner of that one, and I don't think that's too surprising given the fact that as soon as you mention Final Fantasy Tactics in a list of these games, you go, oh yeah, okay, sure. There was not really much chance for another one. Sorry, Link to the Past, because, Zelda Link to the Past was so fun. Going back to it, that was my first 2D Zelda game, so going back in that series timeline and being able to see a much, much earlier representation of the Zelda series, very, very cool. Challenging in its own way, and probably some regrets that I have in that playthrough of how I handled it with the Nintendo Switch Online version. Like, I probably shouldn't have rewound as much as I did, but at the end of the day, I enjoyed myself, and I really, really liked that game, and it was really cool. But Final Fantasy Tactics, just, for the same reasons as we were speaking about in Best Narrative, a pretty easy clear for Best 90s game. But regardless of whether or not there was a winner in here, just being able to look back and have a focused element on the 90s and give some spotlights to stuff like Alien Trilogy was a lot of fun. Xena was just silly. Rogue Squadron was my first Nintendo 64 Star Wars experience and my first sort of focus on the vehicles only. I'm used to more Battlefront, Republic Commando, stuff like that in my childhood, but not much Rogue Squadron. And that was really fun. Clock Tower is, technically a 90s game, and it got its modern remaster, but it's still very much the same game. So even something like Clock Tower was really, really fun to check out. And now to follow up with that one, we have the best 2000s game as well. So obviously did a long-winded intro for both of these decades, so we'll just get straight into the top 10 for best 2000s game. Deus Ex Invisible War, Jedi Knight 2, full title of Star Wars Jedi Knight 2, Jedi Outcast. I know that one. Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, The Wind Waker, Fatal Frame 2 Crimson Butterfly, American McGee's Alice, Luigi's Mansion, Spider-Man, Friend or Foe, Cold Fear, and Fear. A great list of 10 games here from the 2000s, and what's kind of great about this list is it fills me with nostalgia, and it's that different kind. It's like the nostalgia for the things that you didn't get to experience in that time period. Being someone who was born in the middle of the 90s, by the time I had something going on up here, we were already into the early to mid 2000s. That's kind of where the core of my consciousness is. Those are the core memories. While I'm technically a 90s kid, it's like by the time I was doing anything, it was the 2000s. So I have a hell of a lot of nostalgia for this specific decade. I think that most of my favorite gaming memories take place in this decade. It's when the PS2 comes in, it's where we get Final Fantasy X, it's Jak and Daxter, it's Kingdom Hearts, it's Halo, it's Fable, it's BioShock, it's too many games to even throw out there and mention, but I just think that I don't even think it's me being like shitty about, back in my day, the games used to be good. There's an element of truth to that, but I think that there is genuinely something that we took for granted in the 2000s, and that was a very, very sweet spot between how good the games looked and how quickly they were coming out. Because games look really damn good now, but they are taking 5 years to come out. Multiple years between sequels, whereas when you look at the late 90s to early 2000s, in the same time period that we get like one game that we wait so many years for, the whole Legacy of Kain series began and ended. And obviously it ended prematurely. We didn't get to, really witness the follow-up, as there was a cancelled game in development at the time. But, obviously we can look back, and Blood Omen to Defiance takes place in a 7-year development cycle. Games used to come out like every 1 to 2 years in a series, and they were fun to play and they looked good. Obviously some games, don't look as good, and some don't age as well. But there are some PlayStation 2 games in particular that look just like PS3 games. They're kind of really pushing limitations, and ones that still are really beautiful because of their art style, Realistic graphics are the ones that age poorly, but art direction is timeless. Picking a unique art style, that will allow the game to age gracefully over the years. And the mid-2000s is something I will always hold very close to my heart. That is where I, got my introduction to Pokemon. It's like the 2005 peak of Star Wars games, where it was Episode 3 coming out in theaters. It was the end of the movies, and they were just throwing Star Wars games everywhere at you. I was so happy in that time period, and I'm happy now, naturally. But there's a sparkle in my eye in the 2000s that make me very, very happy. And so when I talk about the best 2000s list, there is a nostalgia there. It's just the vibe that these games bring. They all very much feel like a product of their time, but are still very, very fun to experience and go through today. So in this top 10 of the best 2000s game, my favorite in this list will go to The Legend of Zelda: Twilight Princess. I think that when I finished that game, well, I know that when I was playing it, and around the time that I finished it, I said that is now my favorite Legend of Zelda game that I've played. And, we've played Wind Waker, and we've played Link to the Past in the same year as well. And then in the previous year, Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. But Twilight Princess was so fucking cool. I just love the stuff that was in there. I liked the art direction that it went in. It's kind of interesting because Twilight Princess was kind of like, from what I understand now, almost like kind of a knee-jerk response to Wind Waker's art style. And I love both. I love that Wind Waker and Twilight Princess can both exist in their art styles. I think that they're both gorgeous games. But Twilight Princess is so good. And I'm glad that I can highlight it in the best 2000s section, because like I said, when you play 40 plus games on the channel, it's really hard to award specific games. And I can't just like purposefully go, no, it has to go to this game. I have to go with what I believe in, even if that's one game winning more than the other, because it's, that's just it at the end of the day. It's really great games going up against really great games, and it just ends up being which one I enjoyed a little bit more. But Twilight Princess, from start to finish, is a fucking fantastic adventure. Obviously, I've played the remasters. I played the Wii U versions of these games, but they were from the 2000s, from that decade, and it just embodies it so well. So really, really enjoyed my time with Twilight Princess. We get to, highlight Wind Waker and Twilight Princess in some different, more unique categories, and I'm happy that I got to even talk about them a little bit, because The Legend of Zelda is a series that I really, really enjoy diving into and doing all the funny little silly voices and just getting lost in the magic and the fun and the adventure. And they're just such fun experiences with iconic storylines and just like these mythical characters that have such a, obviously they have such a legendary status to them, given the name of the legend of Zelda. But the way that the mythos of the world, it's not like there's the same old Link and his adventures, but it's like these different iterations of the character, which I think is just so fun with that world and that universe. So diving into Hyrule for Twilight Princess and having our companion of Midna throughout that adventure, and Wolf Link and other really, really cool stuff that I won't talk about if for some reason someone like me hasn't got around to Twilight Princess yet until recently. Just a fantastic adventure. So Twilight Princess gets its flowers, as a few games have in these more unique categories for my best 2000s game. And now we're going to get to the big finale categories. And so, the final category of the Mapocolops Game Awards came to an end. This category will likely have a great effect on the outcome of the channel. Logan and I, our work will continue for some time to come. But that's another show for another year.
Tubi, this place is lost!
Commander! Move it, Tubi! That's an order!
And now we have arrived at the Game of the Year awards. 2 separate Game of the Year awards, because there is the Game of the Year for 2025, and then there is the Game of the Channel, which is my favorite game out of everything that was played last year. So I always split that one up into 2 categories, and checking our extensive, long list of 2025 new releases, 4 of them we played: Clair Obscur Expedition 33, we played Hollow Knight Silksong, Death Stranding 2 on the Beach, and a remaster slipped in, Final Fantasy Tactics: The Ivalice Chronicles. So we've got some 90s representation. It's a 2025 remaster, so it gets to sit in here. I think 3 to 4 games is probably what I have space for on this channel each year in regards to just the sheer amount of content, and also trying to balance the new games and old games, and that the newer games, you know, I don't really have the channel for always playing new games, and that's okay. It just means I have to kind of pick and choose which new games get played if I decide to dive in right away, which ones are like I simply have to no matter what, and others that I can kind of hold off a bit and maybe play it the following year, or at least, you know, a couple of months later, especially for the fall releases. You know, we can end up having a pretty either front heavy year or a pretty back heavy year in terms of some of the game releases. Like 2026 is already off to a ridiculous start in terms of how many new games that are coming out, that I'm like, I'll get to those eventually. But looking back on 2025, an incredible lineup. I'm happy with the 3 games that I chose. I think like Expedition 33, Death Stranding 2, those games were sort of like the main 2 that I was like, I absolutely want to make sure that I'm playing those straight away, especially with Death Stranding, because, you know, I was late to the first game, but now I got to actually show up and play a Hideo Kojima game at launch. That was just very, very special. And then Silksong was one of those things where it's like, we don't even know if it's going to come out. And then they just, you know, they dropped the September release bomb on us, and I finally got to play that one as well. And then Final Fantasy Tactics, just a game that had been in the backlog for just an immense amount of time. And the remaster was just perfectly timed for me to finally jump in. So an incredible list of 4 games that came out last year. My winner out of this category is going to go to Clair Obscur Expedition 33, my personal game of the year for last year. Just an astounding achievement. There's just so much packed into that game in terms of its musical presentation, the writing, the characters that we get to play as and are exposed to. It's such a fantastically beautiful world. Like the way that that world is created, while, you know, being a huge love letter to its main inspirations, just very, very beautiful. I am so happy to see that game be a success. I would love to see more out of the Clair Obscur universe and see what would come next from them, in if they want to build on the existing story, tell new stories within the same sort of world that they've built. I'm absolutely there for it. And I still need to check out the thank you update from the Game Awards that they dropped, because stuff has been moving so fast. I haven't even been able to check it out myself personally, but I want to see that as well. I want to see if they're going to do anything else either with this game or just what's next for them. It's going to be so exciting. So I will absolutely be watching them keenly to see what comes next. But Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is my game of the year for 2025. And now we have reached Game of the Channel. This is essentially the main event. While we love to focus on Game of the Year for new releases for 2025, what was my favorite, this one is the more important one for this channel, as you know, I play so many more games and we cover so much ground, especially with playing iconic games from so many different generations. So this is essentially the top 10 games list to beat out all of the other top 10 lists that have come before this. This is my top 10 most beloved games of 2025 on the channel, culminating in my winner. So, our list of nominations: Alice, Madness Returns, Clair Obscur Expedition 33, Nier Automata, The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, Hollow Knight Silksong, Yakuza 0, Death Stranding 2, The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, Final Fantasy Tactics, and Lies of P. That is my incredible top 10. It was very, very tough to leave some games out of this list in particular, but that's the name of the game. That's a top 10. And even tougher to kind of, you know, whittle it down to, if I was to even rank them, we won't talk about it, you know. I found that, you know, an unranked top 10, or like top 9 rather, with 1 being my winner, is the easiest way for me to do it without getting too stressed about which game's better than this. And it's just so much mental stress to have to rank those games accordingly. But with this powerful 10 games on the list, there can only be one, and the winner was easy to choose. The winner was easy to choose because the winner of my Game of the Channel award will go to Nier Automata. Maybe the greatest video game I've ever played. It's in my top 3. Final Fantasy VII, Nier Automata, and a third game that constantly fluctuates in and out of what I classify because I'm like, I have my top 2 right now, and then my other 3 games are like fluctuating between like Soul Reaver 2, Disco Elysium, and, you know, don't make me do it. I can't lock that in right now. I will at least tell you that Nier Automata is in my top 3 video games of all time, and yeah, it absolutely deserves to have the winning spot for Game of the Channel. It came in there as the last eligible game, and it was crazy because while I was playing it, I did have a particular thought that I said, damn, it's really unfortunate for every other game I just played on the channel this year when I do my Game Awards video, because I haven't even finished yet, and this is the game. Like, it wasn't even at the point where I was deciding games or choosing, you know, sorting out my categories and, you know, thinking about it. I was mid playthrough going, damn, it just is gonna sweep. And, you know, either I could have said, oh, well, let's push Nier Automata to 2026, but then sorry to all the 2026 games that I play, because we have our winner bright and early. It's, you know, it's just one of those games that comes in and it's just going to absolutely crush anything else that goes against it. And while this is like an awards video where there is, you know, clear winners, and I, you know, put certain games on a pedestal, I think it's important to really focus on just how tough that sort of competition is, that there are so many beautiful, amazing games in their own right that are just so good. It just gets to the point where it's like, when you are literally walking into a room of, you know, solid gold trophies of best games ever, you know, it starts getting to a point where comparing them is really difficult. But it's just like, I just liked this game more overall, you know. But we played so many incredible games onto the channel, and I'm so grateful that I get to post those and share them with you and just enjoy the experience, and always, you know, bring my most passionate self to these new adventures and these blind playthroughs. And I'm grateful that this was the year that I finally decided to dive into Nier with both Replicant and Automata. I'm now in the waiting room for either Reincarnation to get some sort of offline version or something, you know. Yoko Taro has recently, you know, been announced as working alongside Okabe again for an Evangelion something, you know, new series, which is great. But I hope that there is more Nier on the horizon. We celebrated 10 million copies sold recently with the tagline of Nier Automata will continue. How will it continue? Nintendo Switch port. Nintendo Switch 2. I don't know, but will we get more Automata specifically? Will they remaster Automata like they did with the Nier Replicant version? I have no idea, but hopefully a brand new game and a brand new world, and I would like to eventually be able to play Nier Reincarnation for myself. That would be great. But fell in love with that world, one of the most just hard-hitting, emotional, and fun-to-play games, and it's just right up my alley in terms of its sort of like aesthetics and storyline, and the music is the greatest music ever. You know, when humanity is extinct and thousands of years we look back at, you know, what we uncover, I want the Nier Automata soundtrack to be pristinely preserved and then the next civilization and culture that is formed from that music. That's how important that music is to me. Just, you know, incredible to give best soundtrack and game of the channel to Nier Automata. So thank you so much for listening to me yap over our Game of the Year and Game of the Channel awards. And then we're going to close it out with a couple more before the show comes to an end. So now that we have covered the 2025 awards in their entirety, we now have another one that looks to the future. We are currently in 2026 and have been experiencing some incredible new releases already and ones that are just over the horizon. So for 2026, this is the most anticipated category. These are the games that I am looking at specifically that are coming out in this year that I really, really do want to play. It's just finding the right time. It's always tough because I know that the majority of my audience, they want to have played the game first before they watch instead of, you know, freely watching anything. And that's totally fair enough because it's, you know, it's spoilers and it's that all sort of thing. And then obviously, you know, that the categories, the, you know, the subcategories, they split up a lot where there are some people that's like, you know, if I won't play the game, then I'll watch, and, you know, the different audiences for all of those different new releases. So it's tough. I want to have probably like 3 new games that come out this year that I definitely play this year. If we're lucky, we'll play more, but I already have an extensive backlog and a lot of games already that I want to get to that are just sort of like old staples that everyone's like, how have you not played this game? Everyone's played this game. Though I have so many of those in my backlog that I got to get to before we just keep adding new bangers to the list. All that aside though, I just want to at least communicate the games that I am most excited for that are coming out this year. And so my most anticipated for 2026 is Resident Evil Requiem, Replaced, Fable, 007 First Light, Lego Batman Legacy of the Dark Knight, Esoteric Ebb, and Marathon. I am also very excited for Control Resonant, as you can tell by the fact that I included it in this list at the time and definitely not editing this in post, where for some reason Control Resonant wasn't on the fucking list. Control Resonant is also probably my most anticipated, so it's even more bizarre that it wasn't in the fucking list. Control Resonant, most anticipated game for 2026. And also with a shout out to the Metal Gear Solid Master Collection Volume 2. Metal Gear Solid 4 is free. It's going to be off of the PlayStation 3 prison finally. That is worth a celebration. That is absolutely worth a celebration. So I'm just anticipating its freedom and to see a whole new like generation of people be exposed to the game affectionately referred to as playing a movie for those cutscenes. They're gonna enjoy that. That's for sure. I love Metal Gear Solid 4 so much. Excuse me. So it's going to be really, really fun to see people celebrate that, and especially with it releasing on PC as well. So modding potential is going to be really enjoyable there as well. A couple of other games have kind of snuck into this most anticipated list really, really quickly. Esoteric Ebb being one of those. Shout out to that as being what everybody is probably going to affectionately refer to as the next Disco Elysium. It is in that realm of video games. It has Planescape Torment inspiration as its sort of main inspiration. Another one in the backlog that I gotta get to, you know? These games that keep being inspired by Planescape Torment and then also Disco Elysium, you know? Esoteric Ebb is apparently, from what I can see, just getting a very, very positive feedback with it fitting into like a Dungeons and Dragons Disco Elysium situation. Very excited for that. Marathon kind of came out of left field for me as well to get into this anticipated list. As of now, I've already been probably posting about it and releasing some Marathon themed content on the channel. So that's, you know, kind of happening right now. Resident Evil Requiem is already out, and I really want to play that, and people are excited to watch, and people are having a good time with that. It's just a matter of time. This has been a very busy period filming and putting this together while also trying to work on the other Let's Plays that I'm currently doing. It's just, yeah, very busy, trying my best to get as much out to you as I can. So Resident Evil Requiem will make its way on the channel as well, especially as I've gone through the whole Resident Evil journey on my channel over the years, which has been awesome. But yeah, a great, most anticipated list of games that I am just excited to hopefully play this year or, you know, in the coming years. Some really good bangers there. Lego Batman especially just looks like so much dumb fun. Just, you know, I wanted to throw shit out like that as well. Like, it's not, you know, I'm only looking forward to the massive, massive games. Like, Fable is a tough one for me. This is like my last chance with Xbox, you know. Fable has been the straw that I've been holding on to, a very thin line with Xbox, and Fable is a bit make or break for that. I'll be picking up Fable. That is a series that means a lot to me. Obviously, I played that growing up, so it doesn't really have any representation on the channel, but it is one that I am highly, highly anticipating above the rest. It's a series that means a lot to me, so hopefully it's a good game, and hopefully I get to do an incredible Let's Play of it and share it with you guys as well. And for our closing category of the night, we are going to talk about the fan favorite content of the Mapocolops channel. This is a collection of the most viewed episodes over 2025. Now, in the previous years, what I did for the fan favorite category was I measured the views within 2025, or, you know, whatever year I'm looking at, for those views on those games specifically. Like, if I played it, if it was a 2025 or a 2024 Let's Play or something for those Game Awards, just whatever was, you know, relevant to keep it all associated with the awards. Tonight, however, I have changed it, and it is fan favorite in the sense that it is just going to be straight up my most viewed content on the channel over the year, even if it's older Let's Plays. So it's just an all-inclusive look. We can, you know, for the people who love the numbers and the analytics, we can look at what got the most attention on my channel this year. We can see Let's Plays that, you know, have staying power, you know, people that are coming to the channel and watching older stuff, which I love so much, because this is, I guess, you know, the positive thing. It's a bittersweet thing. The double-edged sword of the YouTube game is I got to play the algorithm in a sense that the videos have to do well to then go out to people, and that is kind of as early as possible. That's when a video is first posted. That sort of reach and importance is that sort of reach and engagement is very important, you know, getting the video out there. But the other side of that is my content is there forever, and it is there to stay, and people will be able to come here years from now and look back at these older Let's Plays and go, man, look how much he was really bad at his audio back then, or why is his webcam so big in 2020? What's going on there? But, all of that aside, it's great to have a collection of content that isn't going anywhere. People can come across my channel for years to come and see that I've played a game that they're really excited about and enjoy that. And so this category of fan favorite gives a chance to highlight those specific Let's Plays that are maybe a little more popular over time. Taking a look at this one, which does include some 2025 content, thankfully. I'm not washed, not yet, not just yet. I'm still going. I've still got videos that can perform well in this last year. It's not all, I'm not past my prime. We got so many more to come, all right? In this list of fan favorite games, the most viewed content of 2025, we do have leading this list Baldur's Gate 3 Episode 1 with 93,200 views. That's in 2025. Episode 1 was posted in August of 2024. So this isn't like looking at the episode's views in total. This is how many they got in the following year. So people were still jumping on to the beginning episode of Baldur's Gate 3 those months later across all of 2025. Following that really, really closely was another 2024 Let's Play, Cyberpunk 2077. And honestly, seeing these two games in the most viewed content of 2025, it does make sense. Those were two gigantic RPGs that I played in 2024, finishing Baldur's Gate 3 into 2025. And there was 55 episodes for Cyberpunk, and it was 69 episodes for Baldur's Gate 3. So that's a lot of content, that's a lot of hours, and so those episode 1s of the Let's Plays did incredibly well as people, got to know me. They came through to the channel and they got either, finally saw a Baldur's Gate 3 or a Cyberpunk episode much later into the Let's Play and went back to the beginning. So just incredible to see those playthroughs, doing so well. We do have a couple of 2025 videos here. We have the episode 1 of Expedition 33, a Game of the Year contender approaches, indeed, with 52,000. Did I say how much views Cyberpunk 2077 got? I don't know, actually. 90,600. I don't think I said the number. 90,600. So just behind Baldur's Gate 3. And then Expedition 33, 52,900 views. Twilight Princess, 47,900 views. Ocarina of Time, more Zelda, all of the time, 43,500. Half-Life 2 came back swinging with 41,300. So we're starting to look back at playthroughs that are now getting even older, still getting incredible viewership. Majora's Mask with 39,500. Knights of the Old Republic coming through with 37.2. So hello, Knights of the Old Republic. It's so good. I think that is a mixture of like anticipation for, new Knights of the Old Republic content, not even with the announcement of Fate of the Old Republic at the recent Game Awards though, because this was over the course of 2025. So just my Knights of the Old Republic Let's Play got picked up again, which is incredible to see. And I think that will just, continue as we build into Fate of the Old Republic and the Knights of the Old Republic remake. After that, we have Portal with 33,300. Baldur's Gate 3 Episode 2 with 31,500. Baldur's Gate 3 said, "You ain't seen the last of me." This one's a little bit of a sad one. It stings a little bit. This most viewed content is my Death Stranding 2 trailer reaction video, which has 31,200 views. And initially you'd go, whoa, 31,000 views on just a trailer reaction video? That is actually great. That doesn't happen often. Do I have 31,000 views on the Death Stranding 2 Let's Play? No, I don't. But that's all right, because maybe one day I will. Maybe with the director's cut, people are going to finally watch it. But Death Stranding 2 Episode 1 is sitting at like 10K, something like that. So more people wanted to see that trailer reaction. We then have more Kojima, the Metal Gear Solid 4 finale episode, which the algorithm loves the Metal Gear Solid 4 finale episode, I will tell you that, with another 30,000.2 views. Hollow Knight Silk Song, 27,000. Getting ahead of myself, because Wind Waker is also in this list at 28,000, so close together. Wind Waker, Silk Song for my 2025 Let's Plays once again, and Link to the Past with 25,000, and Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines at 21,000. So there are some really good videos here from 2025, which I love to see, like at multiple points in the list, plus playthroughs that are multiple years old now, also still having relevance. That is really, really amazing. So that's the fan favorite list of the most viewed content. I sort of cut it off around, like, I'd say like 20,000 views is really like kind of at this point, pushing it as like the successful Let's Plays. So Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines creeping in there at 21K. And then to follow on from the fan favorite content, I have like a little subsection which I would say is the most underrated content that I am very, very proud of, content that I love, and that I think a lot of other people do love and should love as well. So I do have a little bit of an underrated category, whether this is just games that I feel like do deserve more views because I think that the audience is out there and maybe just the content isn't reaching them, and just stuff that I would love fans of those games to be able to see and to bring those people into the channel. So my most underrated videos are more of like the sub 20,000 views section, where I just feel like the audience is bigger than that. And I where are they? How do I go door to door and say, have you heard of the Nier Automata playthrough? We'd love to have you. And essentially my little most underrated section is anything under 20,000 views. Let's be real, anything, but some specific playthroughs, right? So like Lies of P at 18,000 views. Where are the Lies of P gamers at, you know? I know there's more. And I do want to just clarify, this doesn't come across as any form of being ungrateful, because I'm so lucky to even have 18,000 views on a Let's Play. It's just more when I look at it from that observational point of, I know that this could be more, and I know that more people could be exposed to this, and I hope that they do. It's that frustration with, you know, wanting to grow and, you know, to do it in an authentic way, to expand the Mapocolops community, you know? So when I am like 18,000 views, nothing. That's more views than what, you know, so many people aspire to get on something that they create. So just to clarify, I am very grateful. I look at that stuff and I go, damn, I want more people to be exposed to it. And I think that's where this is coming from. So like 18,000 with Lies of P is when I, you know, compare that against other From Software playthroughs, just as an example, due to the similar nature of the game. You know, you've got Nier Automata at 16,000, Nier Replicant at 13,000, Death Stranding 2 at 10,000. You know, hopefully more people pick that one up as it comes out on PC. Final Fantasy Tactics at 10,000, and Alice Madness Returns at 8,000 as well. And I threw in Madness Returns because it's like, that's a special one on the channel. So a quick shout out to Alice Madness Returns. After finishing American McGee's Alice and Madness, I felt inspired to work on a video that was 8.5 hours long, which was going through the Alice Otherlands and Alice Asylum content. That was the Otherlands shorts, as well as the art book, and then the Alice Asylum design Bible. And voicing all of the dialogue and the story that was in that design Bible in one massive 8.5-hour video as like a little bit of a love letter to the Alice series, and that I wish that it could continue, you know, but EA doing what EA does best, sadly. And I think that it's a little bit of an underrated playthrough in the sense that there's parts of myself where I pour a lot of passion and time and effort into these sorts of things that I really care about, and you just want it to be seen by people, you know? So I hope that that can be something, like I said, with the fan favorite content, something that sits there for years to come, and people can come and look at this and view it over time, and hopefully it can still be discovered, appreciated, and enjoyed, you know? I just want to share my love and passion for gaming with as many people as possible, and, you know, be a positive influence in that sense in a gaming landscape that is very quick to rage baiting, very quick to post about things that make people angry or upset, or, you know, engagement farming in that sense. It's tougher trying to grow it in a more like natural, authentic way, where I'm just trying to show you how much I fucking enjoy the love of the game and want to share it with you. And for those of you that have joined along the journey and you love what I do and you're grateful for this sort of community, I'm grateful to have you as a part of this community. It means so much to me. So that's where the fan favorite category comes from. And, you know, hopefully some of the games that I've spoken about tonight, if you haven't watched them or played them yourself yet, that will inspire you to pick them up and give them a go, because I know I get a lot of comments from people that, you know, if they see me play a game, they move that to the top of their to-do list, and they sort of go, okay, it's time for me to finally play this. And that's really cool, you know, positive influence in the sense where it's not like, hey guys, buy my sunglasses, I got a fucking sponsorship, they got sunglasses and it plays music. I'm more just like, this game's fucking awesome, you should play it, you know? Positive, authentic, just stuff from me, you know? And that's all I got. This is the Mapocolops Game Awards for 2025. This is where we bring it to a close. Thank you so much for joining me for this adventure once again, and I look forward to the games played on the channel in the year of 2026, when we can do this all over again and celebrate a whole fresh list of video games to talk about, to love and to enjoy, and to celebrate all of the different elements of what we love and enjoy about video games. Once again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so very much for joining me for the Mapocolops Game Awards and being a part of this community, and I will see you in the next Mapocolops Game Awards for 2026.
There it was, the soundtrack to my life. And for a few seconds came harmony. Finally.
The defense program has initiated a purge. If this continues, our consciousness data will likely be deleted.
Pod 042 to Pod 153. We were created to execute the android's Project Yorha plan. We had no capacity for emotion. But when we six were connected and exchanged information, something happened. I cannot deny the feeling of something resembling consciousness and emotion being born.
Unable to reply.
Perhaps we now understand that not everything has to have an answer.
I need you more than ever right now. Can you hear me now? 'Cause we're gonna shout it loud, even if our words seem meaningless. It's like I'm carrying the weight of the world. I wish that some way, somehow, that I could save gentle breeze. No matter how hard I pray, signs of warning still remain, and life has become my enemy.
I'm stuck underneath the gate. You can't even like catch on to the fact that you're being chased by an interceptor, because as soon as an interceptor decides to make you, as soon as an interceptor decides that you're dead, you have already died. You just don't know it yet. That's the thing about these fucking interceptors that I think is so crazy. I was just spawned in! Like fucking interceptors, bro. I just spawned in! Oh, that's hilarious. Okay. I guess we should accept the order now. Oh! Wait, what the fuck? No, what are you doing? Oh no, I'm being punished. No, I'm being punished.
No, no!
-6
Oh my god. All right, I get it.
Tourists are not welcome here. Only a brave or stupid man walks here alone.
Yeah, I'm not the stupid.
Let's go. It's banned! It's banned! It's banned! It's banned! Hey! Stop acting like a freak.
Interesting. I heard you was talking shit.
I will never join you again.
There will be a lot of fighting, though.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it's true.
There will be a lot of fighting.
Exactly.
Count me in then.
Good.
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 Yes, good.
Cerebro, imagine Dex playing this game.
Blunt force is the only thing they understand.
I have two fists here, Harry and Sally, and when they meet, oh, it's a fucking romantic adventure.
他のお客様のご迷惑になりますので。
絶対に迷惑はかけない。いいよな。
かしこまりました。
Whenever I talk about it, my toe starts. Thanks a lot. I'm not showing you my foot.
The chunk of face flying past me. What do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean? Just fucking block him! Oh my god! Dog. Pick up. Oh my god. Oh! My baby. This is mine now. See ya. Let me out. This dog has chosen me. You can... Look at this. I was wholeheartedly, when I saw pick up, I was expecting Link to do the, like, above the head, just classic holding thing. We just hold it like a little baby and it's wagging its tail. Oh my god. How much for the dog? Because he is now mine. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they don't. Oh, we haven't. Oh my! What are the like? Here's the thing. I say, what are the chances? We know what the chances are. We can count. I hit one, proceed to miss 3 times afterwards. That is crazy. Okay, we have assumedly the 3. I'm pretty sure we got the 3 and the 4, which means that all these squares, there is just the 2 remaining. And I have 4 cannonballs. Through the power of psychic connection, it is probably right here. What the fuck? Through the power of psychic connection, I have it in the bag. I win because I have enough bombs. Oh my god! And then they just respawn very easily. Wait, what? What is that? What the fuck? What is that? Why would they make that? Why is it a half chicken, half person with like a series of boobs? What? 1,412 years later from 2053. I'm sorry? Is he giving up? I think he gave up. He fucking gave up. Let's go. Oh no, what the fuck? No, what the Ooh, lower chance to hit Bastadio, but he's been shelled. And look at the timing of...
Behold my might.
Here I go.
That's crazy. I can now survive a double hit attack 3 times. Oh wait, I could already only survive a double hit attack 3 times. It's the cats that are the problem, not me. What do you mean? He's run into the acid?
Acid! I'm ready. Acid!
I can't get out the window!
Acid!
Just let me...
Acid!
Let me out!
Acid! Acid!
He just fucking... Are you kidding me, dude? Yes, I got to do it to him! Yes! Oh. No, you stop. No. You stop. Stop it! Oh, stop!
Hey, something wrong. What? Next time.
Oh. Dude, he fell, but he didn't fall in.
So let's see.
He's out
What
cold.
was it?
All right, let's split up. Let's have a look around.
The last stand. All right, ready to break. Oh, ready to break. Virtuous stance, expedition counter, high physical damage, flurry, fury. Yes, Mael. What is happening? Whoa, what the fuck is going on? And why is that CL? We're all just fucking him up at the end. Cinematic finish. Where's Verso? Oh, he's using his own sword. Yo! Yes, it's Big Alice time. Oh, squish him. Let's fucking go. Yes. Great. We're about to get gate-quaked while I'm walking down. Okay. Yep, okay, okay.
I'm afraid you dropped some cargo, sir.
Fuck you. That's so rude. What the fuck? It made me like slip and get thrown? What the fuck?
Are you sure
Oh
we should be
my...
traveling without the adventurer?